So good morning. I want to welcome back Dr. Mark Peters, who is a pulmonologist working at St. Thomas Hospital here in Nashville.
Thank you.
And Mark was here last year. We did an interview and talked about how important face coverings are. And you may notice today that neither of us are wearing our face coverings indoors. And that's because both of us have been fully vaccinated for COVID, and the current guidelines mean we don't have to wear them indoors when we're with other fully vaccinated people. Right?
Correct, yes.
So today I wanted to do a follow-up conversation to talk a little bit about the vaccine and why it's so important in the pandemic, and also where we see the vaccine or the pandemic going into the future. So COVID has been around with us since in Tennessee since a year ago, March.
Yes.
And you have been on the front lines from the very beginning, right?
Have been in the ICU with the patients at St. Thomas, yes.
So treating those COVID patients, and I want to say thank you to you for that and all the medical staff there. So
yeah, you're welcome.
Y'all have been fighting a diligent battle in the last year. And I'm also deeply aware that everything that we do in our community, and also here at St. Henry, to keep people safe, makes your job easier in the hospital.
Oh, absolutely.
There are fewer cases.
Trying to see the case numbers go down, that's our goal.
Yeah.
Down to zero again.
So one day, 0 is our goal, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit first about the ethics surrounding the use of these vaccines. So one of the things that I know you're aware of is that some individuals and moral theologians and bishops have questioned whether we ought to be using these vaccines because they're connected in their research and development in some cases with fetal stem cell lines that were derived from abortions,
Yes.
and in some cases decades ago. And so in light of this, the Catholic Church did make a pronouncement back in December with the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith at the Vatican. And it has said with some moral clarity, while we never support abortion for any reason, that it is morally acceptable to use these vaccines for the common good. And the United States bishops, you can also find great information on their website about how important it is in terms of, as an act of charity, an act of love, to protect life, to receive the vaccines. So I wanted to emphasize that. I will also add that the Church has been really clear about saying, to the extent that we can encourage scientific and medical research in the future, and governments to avoid using stem cell lines derived from abortion, that we ought to speak up on behalf of the innocent. So I wanted to mention those things about the morality and the ethics at the outset. But as a doctor, you're really here to talk primarily today about why the vaccine is important from a medical point of view, and also perhaps to alleviate some of the concerns people might have about side effects, effectiveness, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so, we met here last year, just about a year ago, and a lot's happened in the past year. We've seen several spikes, and the case numbers that we're seeing now are about 50,000 per day in the United States. So it's not gone yet. This is still a problem in the United States, but it's gotten a lot better. And a part of that reason, of course, is that we're all diligent about masking, but really we're seeing starting to see the effect of the vaccine. And as I was looking at the most recent data, we saw that 103 million people, so 31% of the United States population, has been fully vaccinated as of last week, which is great news. And even better news is that the patient population over the age of 65, 82% of that patient population have received at least one vaccine, and nearly 70% have been fully vaccinated. So those most vulnerable people have really taken to the vaccine, and we're seeing that in the hospital, where our numbers not only have come down, but the elderly, the most vulnerable, we're not seeing as many of those patients. Now we need to focus on that group below the age of 65, those adults, age 16 or 18 and over, between that and 65, trying to get them vaccinated. Because as you said before, there's really two reasons to get vaccinated. One is to protect me, but the other is by me getting vaccinated, I'm protecting you. So we want to do that to help protect our neighbors and the most vulnerable out there in the community.
I appreciate you mentioning that exactly, because after I got my vaccine and was fully vaccinated, so after it was completely effective, it was not long after that I was called to go anoint someone at home who's being treated with chemotherapy for cancer and is currently immune compromised. And I can only say I was enormously relieved that I knew I was far less likely to give a deadly disease to this woman than I would have been had I not been vaccinated. Now that doesn't mean I still didn't wear my face covering and do all the protocols to be extra safe at that point. But with the vaccine, I was undoubtedly safer with that vulnerable patient, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't want to inadvertently give our neighbors the coronavirus, especially now the people that are under 8. I mean, we're still want to get 100% of everybody over 65, but now we need to try to encourage those under 65 to get this vaccine.
So at the high point of the pandemic, you saw numbers in the ICU at St. Thomas being up in the
40s.
In the 40 people in the ICU at a time, and you're down now to about
we have
typically
10 to 15 in the ICU right now.
And most of those now are young people, right?
They're under the age of 65. A
So,
smattering of elderly, but we're seeing a disproportionate number of young people.
and those people who are in ICU don't get there unless they have pretty severe illness.
Yeah, it'd be considered severe COVID.
So they would be, many of them having to have a respirator or oxygen to stay alive, right?
High levels of supplemental oxygen and or the ventilator, life support.
And it's also true that for many people who experience COVID, some of them are still experiencing long-term symptoms of the illness months after they got the illness, right? So there's some long-term
Absolutely, and that's what we're
cases.
in my office practice. That's what we're seeing now is the people that have had downstream effects from COVID.
And I was looking at last week in the news, there was a chart published in the New York Times showing increased mortality by year over the last century plus. And the amount of increased mortality in the United States during the year of COVID was higher than increased mortality even during the Spanish flu pandemic. And they're attributing that not only to the illness itself, but related things like addiction, overdose from people who are isolated and alone. So it seems that the ramifications of the illness have impacted health in a lot of different ways.
Oh, no doubt about that. I mean, it's not only affect the COVID-related deaths are not just COVID, but there are so many other downstream effects for the elderly, for the people that have addictions or even other comorbidities. It's devastating.
And if we did not have a vaccine or vaccines currently available with COVID in the United States, we would likely still be seeing much higher numbers, even if we had continued to do all the other protective things we were doing. Is that?
I mean, it seems as if we would rival India, what's going on in India right now, or the country would be completely shut down.
Yeah, and that was the thing too. I've been watching too on the news what's been happening in India, and also talked to Father Shinto, who is here at St. Henry with us, because he has people living in India. He talks about how bad the situation is there. They don't have vaccines available nearly to the extent we do, nor do they have things like the amount of oxygen and basic things that they would need for that. And that's the other ethical issue that Pope Francis has highlighted a lot when he has spoken about the pandemic and also about the vaccines. Pope Francis has strongly urged everyone to get a vaccine, but the second great moral question he's been highlighting is how important it is that the vaccine not stay in rich countries, but be available to the poorest, most vulnerable populations around the world, for example, in India.
Absolutely. I mean, this is not a United States problem. This is a world problem.
And if the pandemic is not effectively treated globally, eventually it's going to come back to the United States, because in the age of international travel, unless we have effective booster shots, it's always going to be a danger.
It's going to, until we rid the world of this or find a way to keep it under reasonable control, this is going to be a problem. I mean, we can solve our little country problem, but we need to be participating in the solution from a world viewpoint.
Right, that makes sense to me. And so also the other thing I wanted to bring up is the vaccines, especially the Pfizer and the Moderna, have been extremely effective at preventing serious illness, hospitalization, and death. And so I asked you earlier, before we started having our filmed interview, how many people have shown up in the hospital with severe COVID who have already been fully vaccinated?
So far, to my knowledge, we've not seen a case of people that have had severe COVID and have been vaccinated.
So that's wonderful news. So
absolutely,
currently, yes. The very seriously ill people in the hospital are still unvaccinated people, and you haven't had a single case that you're aware of a fully vaccinated person in the hospital with severe COVID.
Yeah, we've seen a few cases as outpatients of people that have had COVID, but they usually have mild COVID, but not serious COVID, and end up in the ICU kind of setting.
Okay. The other thing I will say is the gift I think that the vaccine is really bringing, in addition to protecting health and life, is it's enabling us as a community, as a society, to come back together again safely. So, for example, with Metro Nashville, I know that as of May 14th, that restrictions are being lifted on numbers at indoor and outdoor gatherings, and face coverings outside will no longer be required by Metro, even though the CDC would still encourage folks to wear them outside events when they can't have physical distance. Is that?
Yes. I mean, I think we need to remain diligent about trying to do the best thing to prevent spread of this disease. That still means masking indoors, particularly if there's not you're in a group that's not fully vaccinated, and masking outdoors if you're in close confines with other folks, and still doing the hand washing and the social distancing. All of this is really important because we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. We
Right.
still have a ways to go, and we can get there if we do those simple things and get vaccinated.
So it's a combination of all of these things that are helping right now. And but I will tell you, we were able to have our women's club mass, and everybody was masked, but we're also able to have a meal. And of course, you can't keep face coverings on when you're indoors at a meal, and the weather was not good to go outside. And it was the first time we had gathered folks together. But as I kind of went around the room and just had casual conversations, almost every single person in the room had been vaccinated. Now, this is typically not the young, but some young women were also present. But the gift of knowing that we were all in a safer place as a result of this, that's the ability to return to community, which I think is important.
It gives us peace of mind.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, one question came up about, these vaccines are highly effective at preventing serious disease and illness, and actually the percentage of protecting from even getting the illness is very high. But in terms of, we don't yet know how long the immunity will last, right, from the vaccine. So can you say a little bit about possible need for boosters in the future?
So we know that the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine for sure still have excellent immunity after 6 months.
Wow.
We think that there will still be fairly good immunity even up to a year, but I suspect, and I think most other physicians who are on the front line and the researchers believe that we're probably going to need a booster. And that booster, it may be similar to what we do with flu vaccine in that they incorporate a variant, something that's coming out more prevalent in the community. But we suspect that there will need to be a booster, but we don't know that for sure. I know that Moderna and Pfizer are working on a potential booster. So who knows, but I think we should all expect that next winter we may be getting a booster.
Okay. And also, you hear a lot in the news these days about, of course, which is normal with viral development, with various variants that are developing around the country and around the globe. And so far, it seems that the current vaccines have been fairly effective against most of the variants that we have in our country, right?
In the United States, for sure. Yes.
Okay, so that's incredibly good news. So, I think that this is so helpful in terms of just, giving people a little bit more of an understanding about, the progress that we're making and how everybody can be part of that progress.
And what we can do to help our neighbor.
Exactly.
And protect, I just love this idea that what I do is a gift to the rest of the community, because by protecting myself, I'm also protecting my fellow parishioners, my colleagues at work, the guy at Publix. So this is a gift.
Thank you. So appreciate so much, Mark, everything you've been doing. You've been a great help here in the parish for me personally as we plan step by step how to continue to celebrate safely together and be a community of faith together. I really appreciate your wisdom, and also am really grateful for the work you're doing in the hospital and with all of your colleagues. So,
well, I've been honored to help.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
And to all of you folks in our community, let's continue to pray that God will help us to keep each other safe. And also, let's continue to pray in a very special and a particular way for those people throughout our world who most need prayer today. And I'm thinking today especially of our brothers and sisters in India, a place that is really greatly affected, that there will be relief.
Yes.
And that we can help support actions that help them as well. So thank you, Mark.
You're
Much
welcome.
appreciated.
Yeah.
God bless.